All right. So, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Starr Sisters podcast. Wow, that sounds crazy to say. I'm Amber, and I created this podcast because through all of the work that I've done over the past few years, um, and all the women that I've met along my own personal healing and teaching and student journey, I wanted to create a space where I could essentially um, invite these women to come and speak and have beautiful conversations about their lives, what makes them tick, what has helped them create this life that they have, this mm, maybe awakened, healing, feminine life that they have, and their gifts that they share with the world. So that's the goal for this podcast for me. Um, and just a quick backstory of myself. I've been working in the health and fitness industry for the past 8 years now, starting as a yoga teacher, but that was just the little scratch of paint, the beginning part for me that sort of cracked my heart wide open, and it led me to so many other movement modalities like animal flow, FRC, functional range conditioning, pole dancing, sensual floor work. The list goes on, and also herbalism, which is really important in my life. And working with people not only on an external level with their joints and their muscle tissue, but also on an internal level as far as self-love and finding that like fire, that light that lights them up, that they can then send out into the community.
Mhm.
So, with that being said, I'd love to introduce Cicely, my teacher, my friend, my sister. She's such an inspiration for me, and I'm so happy that we are co-workers and co-facilitators. So I'm gonna open the floor for Cicely to introduce herself.
All right. Well, thank you, my love. Hi, everyone. My name is Cicely, as Amber just mentioned. Amber and I met several years ago when I was teaching an herbal medicine program for aspiring herbalists, and she was in that class. I was like, she's so different. She's such a gem. And we've been connected ever since she completed that program. And now she actually teaches in that same herbalism program. And so we have been creating and crafting and brainstorming and putting our heads together to really bring interesting content to other women and other people that are just like us. So my background, I work in functional medicine. I'm a functional medicine practitioner and a clinical herbalist, product formulator. So I formulate all of the herbal medicines in my line. And I work with clients essentially who want to reverse disease, want to create an elevated state of health. And I help them reclaim their role as self healer. And that's one of the things that we'll probably chat about just in terms of our own responsibility for our healing. But that's what I do. I have an apothecary, and my practice is in coastal Delaware. And that is really the drive for me, is to see other people with the knowledge and the empowerment to help transform their lives on all levels. I love so much that Amber is also just as passionate. She's multi-passionate, so not just with, the retreats and the clients that she works with, but mobility and training, and really helping people to um, expand their awareness around their physical body and just develop this beautiful relationship with themselves. And so we've got some interesting things I'm sure that we're going to chat about.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like that's what we both do, and like that's the goal of being in service, right? Like being in service to like help wake people up to the fact, well, they have a choice in their health, they have a choice in their life, you know?
Yeah.
A big choice.
Mhm.
And they can choose to just, I guess, suffer and complain, or they can choose to change it and like take control of it. Because there's so much, really. There's more than people think, I think, than they realize, like that they have control of. But one of the big things that we have control of is um well, how we react, how we
Mhm.
react to situations and how other people treat us, and also what we put into our body and do with our body, right?
Absolutely.
Not only as far as food and herbs and liquids and medicine, but also as far as, well, what are we feeding our mind? What
Mhm.
are we feeding our brain? What are we feeding our heart? Right? Like all of these things. So for me, like being healthy, holistic, loving life, and in love with life is so many things. It's who we surround ourselves with, the
Mhm.
what we're deciding to do with our time. And that includes our job, right? Like our passion, our job. It includes our hobbies. And then it really includes like being knowledgeable about our our body, our
Mhm.
body on the external level, but also that really deep internal level too.
Yeah, I agree completely. I agree. Mhm.
Yeah. And I know, so like I was just sick from traveling not that long ago, probably a week ago. Um Coming back from Costa Rica, and right now it's February. I'm in Mexico. I'm in down south. I moved to Mexico 6 months ago. Um, and since then I've like traveled, been doing a little bit of traveling here and there. But I was just sick again in my stomach. And I say again because this has happened to me a really good handful of times, I should say.
Mhm.
But for antibiotic purposes, for me to like reach out to take antibiotics, it's happened to me like 3 times.
Mhm.
So I mean that's a lot for me. That's a lot for
Yeah.
someone who doesn't get sick. That's a lot for like someone who doesn't like to take
Mm.
antibiotics, because for me my medicine is plants. It's my
Yeah.
plants. So it's just, I find it so interesting because this time, when it happened, it was different than the other times, you know? So it could have been tuna that I had the night before. It could have been a few days of using what's called leche bronco, which is like unpasteurized raw milk. Okay.
Gotcha.
Bought it
Mhm.
as a farmer's market, and I was just using it in coffee and smoothies, you know? But
Mhm.
I mean, who knows, right? Our bodies are so conditioned now for, if we do drink cow milk and animal milk, goat milk, things like that,
Mhm.
um, it for it to be pasteurized, you know? So like this, the ability for our bodies, I think now to, when we want to start going back to something
Yeah,
natural,
I know where you're going with this. Yeah.
your
It's
body's like, what? What
yeah,
is this? And it like, it just says no. It says no, or it can't. The biota and the gut flora that we currently have, it like cannot
It
um
it's almost it begins viewing the most natural sources as foreign invaders when it should be the opposite. But like you said, we've been so conditioned to think everything's got to be homogenized and highly ultra pasteurized to the degree that now when we have something in its most natural, most raw
yeah,
form, our stomach is like, "Whoa, what is this?" And
yeah,
I agree. If I had the option, if I had access to unpasteurized dairy products around me, that would be my preference. But it is also challenging when you're traveling, especially international travel,
mm,
and you're getting acclimated still. Your body's getting used to
yeah,
these new environments and new foods, new ways of preparation, new energy, all of that. And so I think as, you know, as healers, as people who work in the healing space, we get pretty frustrated because we're here to really help other people live their best life in terms of their health and their well-being. So when it knocks us down, I was sick maybe like a week before you, Amber, and so there's still like a couple of little remnants.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, I get so frustrated because I'm like, no, I don't have time for this. Like I have to help my people. But at the end
Yeah.
of the day, whether you are receiving healing or facilitating healing, you are human too, and we have to take care of ourselves. So if you're listening to this, if you're watching or listening, depending on the platform that you've chosen, and you're someone who's in the healing space, you must take care of yourself like one of your clients because without you, they absolutely can't reach their goals in the same way that they would have if you had, you know, if you were working with them with your cup full. So we've really got to work on doing that. But I know, girl, it's rough. I'm glad that you're on the mend.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been, I don't know, like maybe 5 days of taking antibiotics,
Hmm.
which last resort for me, but like this time nothing was working. Activated charcoal was not working. Guayaba tea
Mm,
wasn't working. Piña tea wasn't working. Like liquid and days of just liquids was not working. Bread was not helping. Like these little things, tips and tricks that we pick up along the way was not helping.
yeah.
Oregano oil was not helping.
Wow.
Was
That is surprising.
nothing was helping. And so
Yeah.
and it was so weird because, it was a day of like needing to go to the bathroom all the time. And then the next day, complete constipation. And then total pain. Like after like the constipation, it's like pain. And
Wow.
it was like, okay, I I can't do it anymore because it literally knocked me out. I was
Mhm.
so lethargic. I was so tired, getting to the point where like you're hungry but and tired, but you can't eat anything. Like if you do, it's just like you can't.
Yeah.
So and what was interesting this time was I really gave myself the go ahead to be like, you're not doing shit. You're not going to do anything.
Yep.
You're going to, it's almost as if I turned my phone off. Like my phone was on, but I wasn't on it. No social media. I wasn't
Mhm.
texting anyone. I wasn't worrying about calling anyone. I literally just enjoyed and took advantage of the space that I was in.
Mhm.
Sunshine, like I made sure was outside, I got sun. I read or really listened to my audiobook and I just allowed myself to purely rest because I don't got
Yeah.
anything. I don't have it. And so I didn't. And I'm just lucky at the time. It just kind of worked out that um I didn't have as many clients booked and scheduled for this kind of week. And so it was kind of nice.
Mhm.
It was kind of like the universe was like, okay, well, you don't have it in you, so
Go
let's
ahead,
make it
down.
lighter. Yeah, let's make
Yeah.
it lighter. And but it was like it was one of the first times that mentally I was not berating or shaming myself for not doing anything.
Yes, because you probably didn't even have the energy or the capacity. And I think that sometimes when we get knocked down in that way, there's a
Mhm.
lesson to be learned in all of it. Same with me. I knew that one of the messages was for me to slow down when I got sick. And I hardly ever get sick, just like you hardly ever get sick. And that's one of the things that I wanted to also chat about is what are the whys behind illness or behind, even if it seems seasonal, or if it has to do with something very specific. What
Mhm.
are some of the potential whys behind that? Because, yes, we could say, well, where I am in the northeastern part of the United States, it's cold. So I could say,
Yeah.
it's winter time. Oh, it's to be expected. The flu's going to go around. You could carry that perspective, or you could carry the perspective that, well, it doesn't really matter where I am. If my life feels balanced, if my body is balanced, if I'm consuming the things that I need for my body and my mind to and my spirit to be balanced, then it shouldn't in theory really matter where I'm residing. And I truly believe that to be the case, but one of the things is that we sometimes have to force ourselves to slow down. And we have a hard time doing that. And so when we get knocked down with illness or feeling just not like ourselves, it is essential, it is very important that we keep that in mind and use it as a lesson, right? So yeah, I agree. When I was sick, I wasn't even in the mental space to want to be scrolling on my phone or even watching TV. It forced me to do absolutely nothing and to let it ride. Like, I had to ride it out. And so for those of you who are listening, think about the last time that you got knocked down when you were sick, no matter if it was like episodic and maybe something that you ate, or if it was something that you felt maybe you contracted from another person. What could some of those potential whys have been? Are there potholes or areas in your life where you probably needed to slow down, or areas where you probably needed to take a step back and look at a situation in a different way because perhaps you would be making a choice that isn't in your best interest? There's so many different ways we can look at illness. But I do think that it's great to use it as a lesson, as a springboard to figure out the why.
Yeah. This is so beautiful. I was just having a conversation, well, many conversations, but beautiful conversations with a friend just this few days ago. And, she was saying that, I mean, she's another person does not get sick very often, but when she starts to feel like this, maybe a little scratch or like a sniffle, she
Hmm.
realizes and she discovered for herself she is she has been triggered in a way by something happening around her and in her life, right? She's been triggered in a way that um is making her body do its like freak out, and that freak out is like the cold, right? Like
Hmm.
a cold is coming on. And it's because she's been triggered or something is going on in one of her relationships in her life. So it has to do along the form and along the lines of relationships, like whether it's a friend, a partner, maybe a work relationship, right? But it has to do with relationships. So I find that is so interesting because we all have the trigger to the nervous system, essentially, that
Absolutely.
shut
That's
down.
that's a really great point and a really great way to look at that. One of those questions to ask ourselves before we get knocked down, or maybe at the very beginning of that stage, like, what has triggered me? Have I been around an energy from a person or from a situation or relationship that's triggering me right now, that is mentally taxing and just causing my body to want to shut down? So that's a really good way of, it's a great example and a really great way to kind of assess where we are, because we can't run away from every negative stressor um, all at once. And sometimes the stressors are in our own homes. Maybe we are part of the stressor, and so when we come up against those situations that aren't 100% within our control to be able to do something right now, then sometimes we have to take a step back and assess that situation, right? And so, in those moments where we feel the darkest, sometimes where we're like, oh, everything feels shitty around me. Like, for example, if I were to say, oh, the weather here is so cold and like the sun's not out and I just want it to be warm. I want to go to Mexico where Amber is, or whatever it is that you might be thinking. Or for others, it might be, oh gosh, my relationship feels really shitty right now. I don't know what to do, and we rethink we think about our problems over and over and over again, as if we can think our way out of the problem. And that doesn't usually happen. So when we're in that space where we feel lost, we still need to move and take action, but we don't have to stress ourselves out mentally over whatever it is that might be triggering us, because that does not speed up our recovery, you know? And so it's just noticing those little things about ourselves. We all have those little quirks and those little tendencies. And when we tap into that, it makes it 10 times easier to navigate it when we come up against it.
Yeah, I love everything that you just said because we have a tendency, like once we start feeling and seeing those negative things, like we start to spiral, right? We start to spiral into like
Mhm.
then seeing everything that's wrong in our lives or like everything that is in that moment currently like not flowing well or wrong. Um, and it's like, well, we have to come back to the things that keep us like above the surface of sinking, right?
Absolutely.
Um, and and for every certain person, that's like completely different. Um, for me is just like getting inside my body is so helpful. So
Mm. What does that mean when, for
yeah.
someone listening and they might be thinking that sounds really good, but how do you get inside of your body? Like, teach me. What does that process consist of for you? Like in the most organic, natural, non-forced way.
The most natural non-force way is literally like putting my yoga mat on the floor and laying on it and then just seeing what happens. Sometimes I just have to roll around on the floor. Like
Mm,
literally. It's like, yin restorative yoga, but like there's no thought. I'm just like shifting my body weight around, something
I
like that.
like, yes.
That feels really good because you can be as comfy as fuck, right? You can be wearing whatever you want. You're in your own space. You don't have to go anywhere. If you don't have a yoga mat, just put a blanket down. You know
Just
what
get
I
floor or
Just get
something.
on the floor. Get on the floor and move without thinking, right?
Mm.
Because especially when we're in our own space, we should feel, and I don't like saying should, but like we should feel comfortable, right? So if we're in our own space, like there shouldn't be any judgments around us, whether there's people in the home or not, maybe I do know some people and some clients who have a hard time doing things at home
Mhm.
because of animals or because of a full house or, whatever it is. Um, but just making time to make the space, find the space really, and then get on the floor and move almost like unconditionally, right? So like this moment is like a moment of unconditional love for yourself because
Oh,
yourself the space and time to just fucking be there with,
that's so good.
yeah, like without like a goal. There's no goal. There's
So that is probably, like, that's so much better than whatever answer I was expecting. I mean, I knew that you would explain it beautifully, but that is such a beautiful clarification of like how to move. And you said something that really hit me, and that was just like move without thinking. Like, I don't know if you said that, but basically, like, you don't have to have a plan or a roadmap, just freaking move. And it reminded me of like everyone has their thing or that thing that's like a magnet that pulls them. Now you are advanced in your yoga practice. I would be like a super beginner in my yoga practice, but I also love to dance and I used to dance. So for me, that's my magnet. So
yeah.
I'll put on music, or maybe no music, and maybe it's just the energy that I'm feeling in my head or in my body, and I'm moving without any sort of expectation, but there is an intention to just like somatically feel, myself, and whether it's stretching and elongating my muscles or curling up into a ball like child's pose and just feeling if I need to feel comforted and held. Like we put so much stock and so much expectation in what other people should do for us. If you have a partner, then you obviously know what I mean. Sometimes we expect things from other people. And if
But
you're
they can't, they're not in our minds, so they don't know what we're expecting.
right. And if your love language happens to be physical touch, then you probably have tons of expectations around that. But guess what? We have to be our own savior. We have to be our own answer. And so having those tools, like you said, Amber, to just move without expectation and to stretch and to roll around, make a fool of yourself. And if
Yeah.
you're someone who's like, oh my gosh, I cannot do that with other people looking at me, I get it, because I used to be that way where I had no problem dancing in front of tens of thousands of people. Prime example, I used to cheer for the Philadelphia Eagles. They just won the Super Bowl yesterday, for some context. And I saw an old picture of myself. It was like the stadium was filled with, it was filled to capacity, like 70,000 fans. I could do that no problem, but put me in front of like five people, five of my closest friends. And it's like, oh my gosh, I don't want you to see me. I feel weird. We start judging ourselves, right? So if you're someone who is dealing with those kinds of things, then use whatever solitude, whatever time that you can use where you're by yourself, start there. If it's when you're in the bathroom, I have kids, so I definitely have taken advantage of that. If you can go in the bathroom, lock the door, move around, look silly, laugh at yourself, but just do it. And I think that's the most important thing is just start somewhere.
And, I love that you brought up music and dance because it's become a huge part of my life, music and dance and
Mhm.
sensual, sexual, and not like in a way to like turn someone on because honestly, if anyone's getting turned on, it's me, about myself. So,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like the other day I was like because I feel like I'm still kind of coming back to like consistency and energy level. Um my mornings are really sacred to me. So like drinking coffee, just lying on my mat or sitting on my mat, whether I need to journal notes, move, roll around on the floor like a baby, I was just I was on my mat and I was playing some music. And the music is like very feminine, very sensual, very like girl power, right? And I
Mm,
just started moving in a sensual way. And I say sensual as in just like juicy, flowy, feel
yeah.
good, like really like nourishing, but like not just like one pose, another pose, and just like
Right. There's
flowing, right?
fluidity to it. Yes, like
It's
water.
like a
Be
dance,
the water. And if we went out to I don't know, just as an example, if we went out to dinner and we went to like a Moroccan restaurant, and there were these beautiful dancers moving about the restaurant and coming over to the tables and greeting the guests, and I'm like embodying them in my mind right now. We wouldn't think, oh my gosh, she is being like so sexual right now, like
No,
this is weird. We would be like, oh my gosh, she is like in her divine feminine essence, like teach me, like
and
how to
moving
do that.
beautifully and like
Right.
just
And so
embodying it.
sexuality, we are all sexual beings. Sexuality does not have to mean intercourse. And that is one of the areas where we've been so misled and so mistaught and conditioned to think that it's like one thing. But you can be in your sensuality, in your sexuality, and completely turn yourself on and don't need anybody else. And it doesn't have to have an outcome that equals sex. It
Yeah,
just be increasing your comfort level with yourself. Some people
yeah,
have an issue even touching themselves. Some
yeah,
people have an issue looking at themselves in the mirror unless they're dressed. And
yeah,
so I think it's important for people to find where they are, like assess, be honest with yourself, and
yeah.
think about where you honestly are when it comes to those areas of your life. and then find a simple and safe way to start, you know? So, but I
I mean,
love, mhm.
I'm sorry, that's so powerful. Like, and I'm so glad you brought this up. Like, so glad you brought this up because there's such a difference between sexuality and sensuality.
Mm,
You know, sensuality is like self-love to yourself and getting to know yourself, like getting to know
mhm.
yourself. Like you said, in these aspects, what am I comfortable with? What am I not comfortable with? What can I do for myself? And I'm not talking about masturbation. What can I do for myself to like
Yes.
make me feel more in love with myself, more in
Yeah.
my body, more in embodiment and like embodying my
Mhm.
energy, like who I
Yeah.
am, because we all have different styles, different vibrations, different just different energy, right? And you can
Mhm.
tell if you're, you can feel those. I mean, people can feel vibes. Some people might not be able to, but like people can feel
Absolutely.
vibes. And so like you give off a vibe.
Mhm.
And so it's like coming into that. And and you know, I don't know, I might be younger than some people, but I've been told many times, and like just recently I was in a women's retreat, like a sensual women's retreat, and I was doing a workshop with a gal who, to be honest, like that weekend, like the first 2 days, I didn't really talk to. It's like it's just like, it just didn't
Yeah.
happen, right? Like we
Mhm.
didn't have the opportunity to get to know one another, to open up to one another. But I ended up sitting there with her and we did this beautiful exercise where we're looking at each other. We close our eyes and then we open them. We stare at each other's eyes. We stare at each other, close them again. And then
Mhm.
the next person, one person has a chance to express to that person what they love about themselves first.
Mm.
First, you're speaking to her as if you're speaking to a mirror,
Oh,
right?
I love that.
You're
Yeah.
speaking to a mirror like what you love about yourself. And
Mhm.
then you close your eyes sometime in space, open eyes again, and she's looking at you, taking you in, right?
Mhm.
So when she opened up and did the same thing about herself, right? And
Mhm.
then we both close our eyes again, open them, and then the second time we speak, we say what we love about the other person, right?
Mm.
Say what we love about the other person. And this is what I found so incredible, is that the time that we spent looking at each other, feeling each other, being in each other's presence,
Mhm.
know one another. We didn't know one another. We might have spent a few days together before this experience, but
Right.
we didn't know each other's experience. We didn't share anything really about each other's lives, not more than what we might have heard in open conversation.
Mhm.
And I could feel her energy, her presence. Like I could feel that this woman, even though she was young, older than me, but still young,
Mhm.
I think, um, that she was so wise. And she was like this quiet, humble wisdom,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And this had this softness to her. Um, and I say softness not in a bad way. It's this
Oh, yeah.
beautiful softness, right?
And her feminine,
Um,
yeah. Her
yeah,
feminine.
yes, yes. And she shared with me that you you are one of the most authentic and like deeply loving and supporting person I think I've ever met. And the way that you stand in yourself and hold yourself and know who you are is unlike anyone I've ever met before.
This is what she was saying to you about you.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Oh,
like, it's just like, what? I was kind of like stunned. I was like, what? Because we hadn't we hadn't talked, we hadn't communicated really. We didn't know anything about each other, but here we were 5 minutes intimately sitting in front of one another. You can pick up and understand who's in front of you without saying anything.
everything is energy, and
Yeah.
she tapped into that, and it was very
We
clear.
both did.
Yeah, for you to see each other's, those things that really stood out to you. Like you
And
just said, without you saying a word, she saw you and was like, "Wow, she's really strong," or "She's really, in her power. She's so confident." Like, and these are things that sometimes we all want these things, right? We're like, "Yep, I'll take one of those. I'll take one of those." But then when it comes time to actually fully accept it and to acknowledge that in ourselves, I find that we have a hard time doing that. It's so much easier to compliment another woman than it is for us to look in the mirror and say, "You are the fucking shit. Like, you are
you're
doing."
yeah,
Yeah,
you're worthy and beautiful. And
yeah.
and that's what I really think is different between one of the main differences between sensuality and sexuality, because when we learn how to be sensual with ourselves, like this awakens so much within ourselves. When we learn how to look at ourselves in the mirror, when we learn
Mhm.
how to, instead of like negative thought ourselves all day long, when we just like leave all those things behind and we say beautiful things about ourselves on a daily, whether we have to say them out loud, whether we have to look at ourselves in the mirror,
Mhm.
whether we just have to, instead of rushing to put lotion on after a shower or before bed because we're tired, right? And we have a long day and oh my God, we have to wake up early. No, let me
My time.
feel
Mhm.
that.
Yes.
Let me feel the curvature. Let me feel my bony parts. Let me feel my softer parts. Let me just feel myself
Yes.
and
And
spend time in spaces that feel beautiful, right? And feel good and just not rushing and just hands on ourselves, you know?
I agree
Hands
wholehearted.
on ourselves.
And I think that's why, well, we're both creatives, and I realize that not everyone um is a creative, but if you've ever prepared something for yourself to enjoy, you can compare that experience to purchasing something for yourself to enjoy. So you might not be the best cook, but most people have prepared a meal for themselves. And if you've ever intentionally prepared a meal for yourself, when you sit down, you're like, "Oh my gosh, like this is so good," or "This wasn't very hard at all," or like, "I could do more of this." Like you are taking it all in, like you said, like with applying the lotion. Now, you can go to Panera Bread or go to a fancy restaurant or anywhere and grab something and eat it, and you can be like, "Oh my gosh, this is so good." But it is a completely different energy than when your hands are in it, when you are crafting your own magic. And so that just gave me that visual, but I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. I mean, and there's so much that goes into like our health, loving ourselves, you know,
Yes.
all of these things. And like when I think about coming back to our initial conversation, you know, when we get sick, what
Mhm.
triggers that, right? That's one of those things that There's many different things that weave into us feeling healthy, us feeling good. And when we find ourselves in that that low energy or
Hmm.
having a cold or having something else come in, it's, the better we know ourselves, the more time we've spent with ourselves and paying attention and being aware, like the easier it's going to be to figure out, well,
Mm,
why?
yes.
Is it literally just a bug, like whatever, or is it something else?
Right. I mean, we spend time getting to know other people, and we want to know all there is to know about, someone that we love or admire, or
Mhm.
even a friend. But how often do we really sit back and admire the things that make us us? And like you said, spending time with ourselves to get to know who we are. Thinking back to when I got sick, I can specifically, in hindsight, I know that I was mentally stressing, not so much stressing as in worrying, but I was thinking about like planning for the new year and like quarter one for my business. And I need for this to be this way and I need for these things to line up. And sometimes it's like, no, you can have the expectation, you can set the goal, but let's stand in our truth and in our power and take it step by step. Like, first of all, focus on one important thing and take it step by step. And I was so type A, it's got to be like this, it's got to be perfect, it's got to be like that. And Source was like, okay, you need a reset, you need a timeout. I'm putting you in timeout right now. And so, yeah, it's just spending time being aware of ourselves. A lot of people are not very self aware. And sometimes we find things to distract ourselves from the things that we really need to see. It's usually those things that we don't want to do that are the things that we probably should be doing.
Yeah, it's like any movement practice. It's like the side that you're least comfortable on. Like if you're doing like a handstand kick up, or if you know that you're just weaker at holding, your grip is weaker on one side, or like if you literally know you have like a muscle like a size difference, like one
Hmm.
is a different size, completely
Oh,
different size than the other, then you know you have something to work on. But like it's harder to work on those things because it's weaker, because like we don't put enough time and effort into it.
right. And it's not sexy because we're not as good at it.
Yeah,
So we don't
we don't
want
feel good at doing it.
we don't want the learning curve, but that's where the growth happens is in the learning curve, right? It's when we're doing the hard, tough stuff. It might not be sexy, it might not be Instagrammable, but that is where if we continue with like our consistency and our practice and we get more disciplined, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, I was scared and worried about that. Like it only took me 6 weeks and my body looks totally different, or whatever it is that, our goal is for ourselves.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
love that, like, we started talking about getting sick, and then the conversation turned like completely into what it turned into. And here I was thinking, oh, we're going to be talking about the herbs to heal your gut.
Oh, right. That's right.
What do you take? What do you take when you get sick? And we didn't talk anything about that. So, real quick, I have two questions for you.
Sure.
One, what is one of your go-to herbs when you are like down in a cold or a flu funk? What is one of your
Mhm.
go-to herbs?
That's a great question. So,
I know there's plenty. Listen, I get it. I know. But what is like the first
yeah,
one that popped up?
yeah, my brain was like scanning my herb roll like because there's a million and one of them. Amber
Yeah.
knows she's the same way. Okay, so the first thing that I would do as an herbalist, the first thing that I would do, and also how I would guide a client, would be to sort of diagnose or inspect like the potential root cause. Like if you know that you were fine until you went to some party or some event where there were a lot of people and you're like, oh, I know that it was like stuff in the air, or I just probably kind of am coming down with something because of that. That can look very different than I'm running myself ragged and that's why I got sick. So I would first try to differentiate the two to see kind of what bucket you fit into. If you're not sure and you're like, I don't know, I haven't done anything different, I always reach for adaptogens. I love my antiviral herbs, my antimicrobials. I love them to life because they are so powerful at killing germs. But I also know that many of us are living the hustle. I don't even want to say the hustle lifestyle. Many of us are just conditioned to, work, school, home, family, all those things. And sometimes we don't realize that we're running ourselves down. So adaptogens for me, so I take an adaptogenic formula in my advanced adrenal support formula. So, just to kind of name some of the herbs that are in there, because I would individually grab for those too if I didn't have that formula, like eleuthero root, which is also known as Siberian ginseng. That's one of my absolute favorites. Ashwagandha is one that so many people are familiar with now. There are a ton of them, but adaptogens, that class of plants, those are the plants that strengthen our resilience from the ground up. They support our adrenal glands and they improve our body's physical and emotional response to stress. And so that for me would be the basis, because by the time you're sick, you can take all the antivirals, you can take all the elderberry syrups, and they are going to have benefit. But you also, at the same time, need to build your resilience and your strength so that way you can get better faster and not feel crappy the entire time. So that's kind of where I lean, is the eleuthero, the rhodiola, those herbs that are just so strengthening and they're time tested. I mean, they've been used for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. What about you?
I
Or
love.
I'll let you give your feedback, but I want to know what you gravitate towards too.
Um, well, again, like I guess it's the cause, right? Like
Yeah.
what is the cause if we're feeling like down? So for me, just because I've had some gut issues, like that's where my sick has been, right?
Hmm.
Um, I go to um it's so hard. It's so hard
I
because you have
I feel like you is oregano one of yours?
oregano is like I reach for my oregano when I'm like, okay, I'm gonna be going on a flight and I really don't, I'm gonna be around a lot of people. So I want to make sure that I'm just gonna take my oregano. This is like my just in case. Or
Hmm.
when the very inkling of like the tiniest little this, or
Yeah.
like when you like stay out in the cold too long and you're
Yeah.
not prepared for that cold
Yes.
and you're like, oh shoot, like let me take my oregano. Let me just give myself an extra boost. Like that's my oregano. I'll use it also if I have some sniffles, if I
Hmm.
have, anything throat related. That's my
That's
oregano. Um,
yeah,
it's such a great digestive support system herb too.
it is. It
So,
really is.
but that's not the first one I go to. Since I'm in Mexico, actually, um, one of the very first herbs I reach for is goyaba. Goyaba is a native flowering and fruiting tree here in Mexico. And
Mm.
the leaves of this tea, of the plant, um, have been used here since like the beginning of time for everything gut and stomach related. For inflammation, for upset stomach, for constipation,
Oh
for
wow.
diarrhea. Like this has been a time and tested herb. Um,
Hmm.
and so to be straight honest, that's what I use it for.
I
That's
love that it impacts so many different areas and supports so many different
yes.
systems in the body. And that is a really good point, that for those of you listening, if you're just getting started or if you're not really familiar with herbs as medicine, and you're like, okay, I have no idea where to start. Like, start with something that has far reaching effects, something that can benefit almost every body system, so that you can just get the ball rolling with learning and understanding how to take your herbs. What kind of herbal preparation is best for you? Do you prefer pills? Do you prefer liquid, something that you can just like mix in with your water or tea or juice and drink? Like, what is your preference? That's important too, because if you're someone who hates to swallow pills, but you, I don't know, have a consultation with someone, or you go to the natural food store and the clerk there recommends this amazing product, but it happens to be in capsule form, well, that might like dampen your hopes a little bit. Because if you're someone who just does not like pills, I'm one of those people, the first thing I'd be thinking about is, number one, is there a liquid alternative? Number two, is there a way I can open up this capsule and still get the stuff in? Like, I'm one of those people who will do whatever I can to not have to take a pill. So I think that's important. Like, know your preference, but reach for an herb that, even if it's a very gentle herb, something that can impact your entire body system. And you can start to learn it, right? You start to learn what it does for you, and what benefits you're feeling. And then you can identify any changes that you're feeling from starting with one thing versus throwing a whole lot of things into the soup, at once.
And I mean, that makes s- for me, I'm like really simple, but I know there are some people who like just can't do it. That being that being said, um, why don't you just make take a minute or two just to talk about our I'll let you talk about it, our herbal offerings, like the work that we do. Like, what do we have coming up? Because we have some things coming up within the next month.
Yes.
So go ahead, open up about that.
Okay, so oh my goodness, no matter what kind of learner you are, whether you're just in the beginning phases and you're curious, or if you have some self studying under your belt and you're like, I read a little bit about herbs and plant medicine, like, am I good enough to like take a class? Like, there are so many thoughts that come up. Herbal medicine is one of the most amazing life skills that you can obtain for a sustainable life. And I know Amber could talk days on that note. So, we have two main pathways for people who are interested in learning herbalism. The first one is folk medicine. And folk medicine, which actually is going to teach you the ways of our indigenous ancestors and how they used folk medicine to heal themselves, their families, their animals, their communities. And the folk medicine class is a live 8-week program where Amber and I are going to share. Amber's going to be doing a lot of the hands-on medicine making and sharing with you exact formulas that you can create on your own. She'll show you herbal swaps and things that you can use depending on where you're located and what herbs you have access to. And this is going to empower you, because by the time this course is over, you will have all of these different recipes and formulas under your belt that you can use to now bolster your strength, your immunity, your families. Like, it is incredible. And then what I do in the folk medicine class is I help you tie these formulas and these herbs into a clinical aspect, so that you now have protocols and you now have use cases and you know exactly when and why you would use something and how to use it, and also how it can actually create healing in your body, what it can reverse, what it can prevent, what it can strengthen. And so, I mean, listen, we could just go on and on when it comes down to it. But the folk medicine class is a great place to start if you're like, listen, I want to study herbs, but I'm not sure that I want to start a business. So, where should I start? This is where you should start, folk medicine. And you'll get information very soon. Like, by the time this is posted, very shortly after, or in the description, you'll have access to learn more about that so that you can register. And then, if you're someone who's like, that sounds amazing, but I want like, is there more? I want what's behind the other door. And that would be herbal alchemy. That is like our granddaddy clinical herbalism program. It is our foundational course in clinical herbalism that not only teaches you all of the ways of preparing herbal medicine in the folk tradition, but you'll also learn more clinical, more professional ways where you can get more consistent results if you want to sell products, if you want to go into business, if you want to become the herbalist in your family or your community. Not everyone who takes the herbal alchemy program is someone who's like, I want to start a practice. You do not have to, but it is a much deeper level of information and education. And you will learn also the ethnobotanical uses of herbs. And all that means is how our ancestors used them medicinally, geographically, how herbs are used, where certain plants are native, where they're grown, how you can cultivate them, how you can harvest them. And then the one of my favorite aspects of herbalism is starting a business, learning how to work with clients, whether you want to start with your best friend or your mom, or whether you want to say, you know maybe what if I could have a business where I had just a handful of clients and I helped someone else get better. That right there like speaks volumes. And so herbal alchemy is really designed to cultivate the inner herbalist inside of you so that you can then thrive and build this amazing practice, whatever level that looks and feels like for you. And it's just amazing. So there are two distinct levels of learning, and I think that once you see the curriculum and the course description, you'll have very quickly an idea of what feels like the best place for you to start. And there is also room for you to start with folk medicine and then essentially like upgrade later once you complete that to go deeper. And so there are so many aspects to herbalism, and every herbalist is different. And that's what I love, is that this is not a cookie cutter line of work. You can be an herbalist and it can look so different, for each person.
Thank you so much for speaking about our two courses we have coming up. My final question for you actually
Mhm.
is, and this is a question I'm going to be asking everyone on the show. What is your idea, or what does it mean to you to live an embodied divine feminine life? Because Cicely, I
Mm.
tell you, like, you are just a goddess. And when I think
Oh,
of you,
thank
I'm
you.
like, man, this, like, she is just so living in her divine feminine energy. So what does that mean for you?
Well, first of all, thank you for reflecting that back to me, because in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, I don't always look in the mirror and say, hey, goddess. Like, that's something maybe I need to start incorporating. But I appreciate that because it is important for us to hold space for each other and to lift each other up. Oh, goodness. What does it mean for me to live an embodied feminine, divine feminine life? For me, um, oh goodness. I what first comes to mind is living in my most authentic in my most authentic place. So, let me explain what I mean by that. We all have life experience. We have life experiences with partners, romantic relationships, friendships, family, and we all have some kind of trauma. And some of us have children, or we are mentors or whatever to younger people in our lives. And whenever you take a step back and look at these life experiences, you're like, whoa, I've been through some stuff, or I've experienced some things. And so for me, um, I'm 45. So being at this age right now, living an embodied divine feminine life means being authentic to me. It means choosing me. It means that no matter how well my romantic relationship is going or any other part of my life, it means I still must choose me. And what that means is I need to be monitoring my joy, my happiness, my unconditional love for myself, having grace and compassion for myself when things don't go the way I might envision them. And I say that regardless of what's going on around you, because it's great to feel like my life is perfect when everything's going well, but one day things won't always feel perfect. And when they don't, what will you have to rely on? And so for me, I am consistently building my own personal medicine bag or toolbox of ways to show myself gratitude and self love, because whether or not someone is there, I am still here. And so being authentic, and I even play this little game with myself where I will say, okay, let's see in the course of a day, I want to be my most authentic self in every single conversation. If it's with the cashier at the grocery store, if it's with my partner, if it's with my kids, I, in a tactful way, am going to be as raw and authentic as I possibly can, because I go to sleep with a lighter heart, with a lighter mind, and I'm being true to who I am, to my feminine essence. And that is what's important to me. So to really like sum it up, the way I live or embody my divine feminine essence is really being authentic to who I am. And that means if I like something, I'm going to express that. If I don't like something, I'm going to express that, or I will choose not to entangle my energy in a space where it does not need to be. So I think putting yourself first is very crucial, because we can't fully be there for others if we're not leading from a full cup. And being authentic to who we are, that is the way of the goddess. Standing in our truth, standing in our power, and showing what we want or don't want through our own energy and through our own actions. Sometimes it isn't even about what we say, it's about what we present and how we show up for ourselves.
And I love that so much.
Thank you.
I so agree. Oh my God, I so agree. Just being fully authentic yourself and not caring, right? If we have to go to the dark side sometimes, not the dark
Mhm.
side, but we have to express like the things
Yeah.
that aren't just natural and pretty all the time. Like not being
Mhm.
pretty and nice and giving, not giving in, but just yes to everything, but like being real and listening to what works for us, what we're okay with, and what we're not okay with.
Absolutely.
So, my dear friend, thank you so much for a beautiful call, for such a amazing chat. We're going to have plenty more on here. I'm so happy to share and excited
Yeah.
for our
I'm
future selves.
Yeah, same. Thank you for having me. And I can't wait to come back and talk about some other juicy things and really just keep the conversation going.
Yes, so I am going to attach your information for Tau Holistics, where people can connect with you on the podcast information. So if you're listening, you'll find out where you can find Cicely. And if you didn't know already, her apothecary is located in person in Lewis, Delaware.
Mhm.
In the United States. So if you're in the United States and happen to be in Delaware, you can check her out.
But I do work with clients all over. The website is online. You can shop online. So, tons of amazing opportunities and things happening if you're someone who's just curious about getting started with your own health and well being and wanting to elevate how you feel and how you show up. I'm here.
Yes, and I love that so much. Thank you, my dear friend. I
Thank
love you
you.
so much. Ciao, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.